Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. They say the worst moments of your life don't announce themselves with sirens or headlines. They slide in quietly, with the precision of a paper cut, sharp, stinging, and invisible to everyone but you. For me, it happened on a Tuesday. I don't think I'll ever forget how the air felt in the office that day. Too cold, too still, like the room itself was holding its breath. I sat there, in my usual spot near the corner window, third floor, marketing division, Langford and Holt Consulting Group, staring down at the city street below, watching a pigeon limp across the sidewalk with more dignity than I felt. I wasn't crying. I hadn't cried. But something inside me had unraveled, so subtly, so silently, that I didn't even feel it until I tried to speak, and my voice came out in a whisper I didn't recognize. It's strange, isn't it? How the human body can carry so much, years of work, nights of sacrifice, the weight of a dream, and still look the same in the mirror after it all collapses. That day, that moment, was the single worst humiliation of my life. What I can tell you is that it wasn't a mistake. I didn't mess up. I wasn't late on a deadline, or careless, or lazy. I wasn't any of the things people whisper about when someone gets let go or publicly embarrassed. I was the best. Always had been. You don't spend 7 years climbing a corporate ladder with no safety net unless you're damn good at what you do. I was the girl who stayed late, who checked every line of data twice, who knew the mood of the boardroom before the first handshake. I didn't drink on work nights. I didn't call in sick unless I was half dead. I memorized client bios, knew what wine they liked, which of their kids was in boarding school, and what font made them feel heard. I gave everything, my weekends, my sleep, my 20s, and up until that day it felt worth it. Until it didn't. There was a moment, a heartbeat of silence in that glass-walled conference room, when I realized something permanent had shifted, and not just in how they saw me, but in how I saw them, in how I saw myself. I felt small, smaller than I've ever felt, like a ghost in a room full of people pretending not to see me. I work for a firm called Delacroix Strategic Ventures, DSV for short. We're not flashy. We don't have viral ads or a TikTok presence or rooftop parties with string lights and overpriced cocktails. What we do have is influence, the kind built quietly, the kind that moves in back channels and back doors, behind velvet curtain deals and closed-door acquisitions. When I first joined DSV 5 years ago, I was just another junior associate, young, bright-eyed, and chronically overprepared. My department was corporate partnerships, which meant I lived in the gray space between legal jargon and human instinct. My job was to make deals happen, and more importantly, to make them stick. My boss, David Cartwright, wasn't the warm, encouraging type. He was the kind of man who forgot birthdays, but could recite a company's Q3 losses from 5 years ago without blinking. He wore the same 3 suits in rotation and called compliments a distraction. But he noticed results. And I gave him results. In 5 years, I'd helped bring in 7 contracts worth over $1 million each. But the big one, the one that would cement my name in the firm's history, was the Severin Tech partnership. $14 million, 6 months of negotiations, dozens of sleepless nights, and I had done it. Every clause, every risk analysis, every late-night coffee-fueled strategy meeting. I led them. I held the Severin Tech team together when they threatened to walk twice. I soothed egos, bent rules without breaking them, and walked tightropes no one else even noticed were there. And today was the day. Contract signing. It was all scheduled down to the minute. 9 a.m., conference room B. David would preside. I'd present the final draft. The Severin Tech CEO, Malcolm Irons, and his legal advisor would fly in from Toronto. I arrived at the office before sunrise. My hands shook slightly as I held my travel mug, but my reflection in the elevator mirror looked composed, cold even. A woman who knew her worth, who'd come prepared. I wore a steel blue blazer I'd only taken out for investor meetings. My hair was perfect. My nails were still chipped from stress biting, but I kept them folded discreetly on my lap as I reviewed the documents one last time. At 8:55 a.m., I stepped into the conference room. It was pristine. A tray of espresso shots and lemon water sat untouched at the side table. The projector screen glowed softly, the title slide bearing both company logos and a single word: alignment. Severintech arrived on time, sleek and professional. We shook hands. There were nods, brief smiles. My heart was pounding, but I knew the rhythm now. Open with warmth, anchor with facts, then let the ink seal what effort already earned. Then David walked in. He didn't greet anyone. He didn't even look at me. He strode to the head of the table, picked up the contract packet, and began flipping through it with the kind of disdain you'd reserve for a subpar menu at a restaurant you hadn't wanted to eat at in the first place. Then he said it, in front of everyone, with a voice like winter and contempt like fire. "This is terrible work that damages our company's reputation." I blinked. He tossed the contract into the trash can beside him with a casual flick of his wrist. "You are clearly not ready for big contracts," he added, like an afterthought. Like it didn't matter that Malcolm Irons was sitting right there, mouth slightly open, eyes darting between us. And I said nothing. I just stood there, frozen in that moment. My mouth moved before my pride could catch up. "You are absolutely right, sir." Because I needed him to think he'd won. Because he didn't know. He didn't know what I had done the night before, what I had sent, what I had saved, what I had set in motion. He didn't know that this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the end of his part in it. I didn't cry. There wasn't time for that. Not when I could still feel the warmth of the Severintech team's gaze on me. Half pity, half confusion, like they were watching someone drown with a cocktail in their hand, unsure if they should intervene or pretend not to see. David didn't look back as he left the room. The leather soles of his shoes clicked against the tile like punctuation marks in a smug sentence. That contract, the one I'd bled for, was still sitting in the trash bin, pages curling slightly at the edges from the way he'd crushed them. He didn't just humiliate me. He orchestrated it. I felt it deep in my gut. This wasn't some impulsive power move. This was planned. He wanted me to build it, to bring it all the way to the edge of success, to carry it across the finish line, on my back, no less, so he could step in, grab the trophy, and shove me off the track before the cameras started rolling, and I had handed it to him on a silver platter. I could see it now, so clearly. The delays in reviewing drafts, the sudden executive oversight requests, the way he'd started calling Malcolm directly instead of going through me the last 2 weeks. I thought it was harmless. I thought maybe he was just trying to stay involved. No. He was prepping the theater. He'd waited until all the risk was gone, all the dirty work done. Then, he'd thrown the curtain open and shoved me off stage. Disposable, invisible, silent. Not this time. If he wanted to erase me, he was going to have to work a hell of a lot harder. I stepped out of the conference room and walked past my colleagues. Some avoided my eyes. Others pretended not to have seen anything. I didn't stop. I didn't flinch. I went straight to my desk, and I started pulling receipts, emails, draft versions, negotiation logs, calendar invites, voice notes from late-night calls with Malcolm's assistant. Every single piece of work had a timestamp, every edit tracked, every document with my fingerprints all over it. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it for the truth. Because someday, maybe not today, maybe not even next week, but someday soon, he was going to tell someone that the Severintech deal was his, that he saved it from disaster, that he had made it happen. And I wanted the truth ready, neatly filed and chronologically ordered, to burn through that lie like wildfire. Still, something wasn't sitting right. He wouldn't have done this without backup, without covering his tracks. I wanted proof, not just of my work, but of his intentions. So I logged into our internal document management system. Not the client-facing one, but the back-end admin logs, the kind most people don't know exist. And I started digging. 5 minutes in, I found the first clue. 3 nights ago, at 11:13 p.m., a version of the Severintech contract had been exported from my draft folder. Not by me, by someone using David's admin credentials. 2 hours later, a new folder had been created in the executive share drive. Hidden. Labeled under a code name we'd never used before. Inside it? A reworked version of the contract, with minor irrelevant edits. But this one had his name on the metadata, as the author, as the origin. My breath caught. He wasn't just planning to steal my work. He was already rewriting history. I stared at the screen, heart thudding, fingers hovering over the mouse. For a moment, I felt like I was looking down the barrel of a very long war. One I hadn't asked for. One I had every right to walk away from. But then I remembered the way he said it. "You're clearly not ready for big contracts." No, I was more than ready. He just wasn't ready for what I was about to do. It wasn't just me. That's what I kept thinking as I stared at David's digital fingerprints in the system, erasing mine. This wasn't some one-off betrayal. This was a pattern, one I'd seen before, only now I was finally seeing it clearly. The office had a way of forgetting people, and David had a way of making them disappear. I used to think it was coincidence, that maybe some people just weren't cut out for the pressure, that maybe they weren't as sharp or as relentless as they needed to be to survive in a firm like DSV. But now I knew better. I remembered Anna Martins, our lead data analyst 3 years ago. Brilliant, reserved, methodical. She'd spearheaded the Holtrix merger proposal, 6 months of predictive modeling, a cross-market feasibility report that stunned even the board. She was the one who built the framework that secured our expansion into Asia-Pacific. And yet, 1 week before the deal was finalized, Anna was suddenly reassigned. No announcement, no farewell, just an HR memo about department restructuring and her name gone from the internal directory. David called it a mutual decision. But I remembered the look on her face the last time I saw her in the break room, calm on the surface, but something broken just beneath. She left her coffee half full and walked out. Never came back. Then there was Tyrell James, head of procurement strategy. A bit cocky, sure, but with numbers to back it up. He brought in the Hennessy contract, $22 million in licensing and infrastructure realignment. Tyrell was loud about his wins, and I think that's what made him dangerous in David's eyes. He was fired the day after Hennessy signed. No explanation. Just a performance inconsistency email circulated like gossip, and security walking him out. And David? He presented Tyrell's project at the next quarterly meeting, like he'd birthed it from a spreadsheet in his own womb. The board clapped. David smiled. No one mentioned Tyrell again. There were others. Quiet exits. Sudden shifts. Promising stars turned into ghosts with inboxes that bounced back and LinkedIn updates that went oddly blank. And now, I was the latest. I had worked harder than all of them. I had learned from their stories, convinced myself I was too careful, too strategic to end up like that. But David didn't care how careful you were. All he needed was for you to do the heavy lifting. Then he'd push you out before your name could make it into the official narrative. What's worse? He didn't even try to hide the pattern, because no one ever challenged it. No one had proof. They were too stunned, too scattered, too alone to fight back. But I wasn't alone. Not this time. I had receipts. I had timestamps. I had memory. And I had something none of them had when they were blindsided. I knew his game. So I wasn't going to play defense. I wasn't going to cry in a stairwell or vanish without explanation. I was going to build a case so airtight, so undeniable, that he'd suffocate in it. But I needed one more thing. I needed someone else who remembered what really happened to Anna, or Tyrell, or anyone who had vanished under David's knife. And I had just the name, Clara Wu. She'd been Anna's mentor, and she didn't go quietly. She'd just gone silent. Until now. David Cartwright had always been considered a genius. That was the word people used, genius, as if it were a shield that made him immune to criticism. It was on his bio, on the plaques in the boardroom, in every glowing internal memo after a major deal closed. But genius was just the story he sold, the myth he meticulously curated. And I was starting to see the cracks. I spent the next 3 days not at war, but at work. Real work. The kind that unfolds behind the scenes, quietly, patiently, deliberately. I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore. I was mapping his weaknesses. And what I found was something even a genius couldn't erase. First, his reputation. It was built on sand. Half of the contracts he claimed credit for had footprints that didn't match his shoes. He'd never stayed in one company longer than 5 years. There were whispers of personality clashes, leadership conflicts, and one particularly vague reference from his previous firm that simply said, "David delivers results, but requires independent oversight." Second, his need for control. He didn't just demand compliance, he demanded worship. He inserted himself into every decision, micromanaged senior staff, rewrote other people's reports to match his tone. The few who challenged him were either pushed out or quietly transferred. And buried deep in our HR system, I found 6 separate complaints filed anonymously. Harassment, retaliation, manipulation, all closed, all unresolved. But the real surprise came from his personal life. I'd never thought to look there before. David didn't talk about his family, no photos on his desk, no wedding ring. But when I searched through public records, I found her name, Elena Cartwright, his wife, a former behavioral therapist, highly educated, quiet online presence. But something about her recent activity caught my eye. A restraining order filed in a neighboring county. It was sealed, but the date matched the exact week Anna Martins was forced out. Suddenly, a picture was forming, one far darker than I'd imagined. I needed allies, people who'd been harmed, erased, or silenced by him, and they began to emerge like ghosts coming home. First was Margot Ellison, a former board member. She'd resigned 2 years ago without a word. I reached out with a cautious message. Her reply came 2 hours later. "I've been waiting for someone else to notice. Let's talk." Then came Jonas Rell, a journalist who once covered tech corruption for The Intersect. He'd written a piece 5 years ago about execs who rewrite their own legacies. Buried in the article was a quote from a source who referred to David as a climber who burns his ladders behind him. Jonas replied to my inquiry with a single line, "You've got dirt? I've got a shovel." Next was Samir Kapoor, a systems programmer who'd worked under David during the Stratix merger. Quiet, brilliant, and still bitter. He sent me a zip file without a word. Inside were logs, emails, and a note that simply said, "They said I was unstable. I was just under him too long." And then, the most unexpected of all, Elena. I didn't reach out to her. She found me. She showed up at my building. She was tall, graceful, eyes lined with exhaustion, but blazing with clarity. We met in a cafe 2 blocks from DSV. She didn't ask me to explain. She just reached into her bag and placed a small voice recorder on the table. "I recorded him," she said. "During the worst of it. I wasn't planning to use it, but now." She looked up, steady. "You said he hurt you professionally. He's hurt others physically. He doesn't stop. He just moves on." I nodded slowly. She slid the recorder across the table. "He always said no one would believe me. Maybe now they will." And just like that, I had a team. A board member who saw the rot from the inside, a journalist with reach, a programmer with proof, and a wife with the final match. David Cartwright thought he was the genius architect of this empire. He had no idea he'd built it on fault lines. And I was about to trigger the quake. We called it the reckoning. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a precise, surgical one. Every step, every message, every file was mapped out like a heist. And for once, I didn't feel alone in a room full of silent collaborators. We were a team, not a loud one, not a reckless one, but determined. And now, we had a plan. Amanda was our linchpin. She was the only one still inside the firm, still within David's circle of manipulation. She worked in risk analytics, and months ago, David had tried to coerce her into falsifying a risk profile on a multi-million-dollar partnership. When she refused, he'd threatened her reputation. He didn't fire her. He kept her close, just demoted her quietly, froze her out, made her invisible. He underestimated Amanda. She still wore the same tidy blouses, still smiled in meetings, still played the silent role of obedient staff. But when I asked if she'd be willing to go back in, to bait him, she didn't hesitate. "He thinks I'm afraid of him," she said, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "Let's make that work for us." We gave her a recording device. Small, discreet, hidden in the clasp of a necklace. Jonas, our journalist, had rigged it for clarity. "It'll pick up a whisper through a brick wall," he said. "Just don't touch it, and whatever happens, keep your tone even." The plan was simple. Amanda would approach David under the guise of a private partnership proposal, an idea to salvage her career by assisting him on high-value strategic forecasting. She'd pitch it like an olive branch. He'd see it as submission. He wouldn't be able to resist. We scheduled it for Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. his office. Quiet, end of day, no witnesses. While Amanda prepared, the rest of us moved like shadows. Samir combed through old servers, recovering files David had deleted or rewritten. Margot pulled financial records that didn't match board summaries. Jonas drafted a piece for The Intersect, holding the headline like a sword above a king who didn't know he was bleeding yet. And me? I collected everything. Every email. Every credit-stripped draft. Every version of the Severn-Tech proposal with my name scrubbed off. I organized them in a private drive, backed it up in 3 locations, and sent a locked copy to Elena with a simple note. In case anything happens to me, release it. We weren't playing games. Wednesday came like thunder. Amanda walked into the meeting room on time. No makeup. Just her natural face, serene, professional, unreadable. The necklace rested at her collarbone like an ornament. But it was our weapon. She didn't tell us what happened in there. Not right away. We waited in the cafe across the street. Me, Jonas, and Samir, watching the windows like operatives in a Cold War. At 6:41 p.m., Amanda stepped out. She walked slowly, too slowly. My stomach twisted. Her hands were clenched at her sides. She crossed the street like a woman walking out of a fire. I opened the door before she even reached it. "Amanda?" I asked gently. She sat down, trembling. Her hands were shaking so hard she couldn't grab the coffee Samir offered. "I'm okay," she whispered. She closed her eyes. "I recorded everything." Silence. Then Jonas exhaled slowly. "Did he threatened to blackmail me," she said. "Said he could destroy my career, paint me as unstable. Said no one would believe a bitter analyst. Then he started bragging. About Tyrell, about Anna. About how people who can't handle pressure don't belong in real firms. And about the Severn-Tech deal?" Amanda nodded. "He said the board would never trace it back to you, that he'd already rewritten the timeline. He laughed, Milana. He actually laughed. Said he's been doing this for years." My throat closed for a second. Amanda finally took the coffee. Her hands were still trembling. "But he admitted it," she said, voice raw. "Every piece. It's all there." Jonas's eyes lit up. "That's it. That's our detonator." I leaned back, breath catching in my chest. It wasn't over. Not yet. But we had it now. The truth. In his own words. And David Cartwright was about to hear it echo through every hallway he thought he owned. We listened to the recording in silence. No one spoke. No one moved. The air in the room felt electric, tense and crackling, like the moment before a storm touches down. Jonas had cleaned the audio, boosted the quieter parts. Amanda's voice was steady, almost painfully calm. But David's voice? It crawled through the speakers like poison. It began innocently enough, talk of strategy, opportunities, next steps. But then the tone shifted. Subtle at first, then venomous. "This whole diversity wave, it's a phase. In the end, business is about strength, not sentiment. People like Milana don't get that. She's just like my wife, thinks she's better than me. Women like that need to be taught a lesson." I felt my chest tighten. "Amanda, I'm giving you a chance. I'm offering you protection. But if you try to go around me again, I'll bury your credibility so deep no one will touch your resume without gloves." Jonas glanced at me, jaw clenched. "You know that Severn-Tech deal? It's already under my name in the archive. I even made some tweaks to her risk model. Nothing too flashy, just enough to make it mine." She handed it to me, and she smiled while doing it. "That's the best part." He laughed. "She thinks she's clever. They all do it first, until they realize who really runs the room." My hands were ice. "Technology theft? Please. Half these systems are just recycled ideas dressed up in a new UI. I'm not stealing. I'm optimizing. And if someone cries foul, I'll remind the board who's delivered results and who's been emotionally unstable. That label sticks, Amanda. Ask around." There was a pause on the tape. A scraping sound, like him shifting in his chair. The problem with women like Milana is they walk into a room like it owes them something, like they built the damn company. But they forget. They're replaceable. All of them. Especially the loud ones. No one spoke. The audio clicked off with a soft mechanical pop. The silence that followed was louder than the recording. I stared at the screen, my reflection faint in the dark glass. That was it. That was the moment it all crystallized for me. Not as a story of betrayal, not as a personal grudge, but as a war I hadn't realized I'd been drafted into. This wasn't just about me. He hadn't just tried to erase my work. He'd built his whole career on silencing women, on using fear, manipulation, and reputation to strip power from anyone who threatened his ego. Anna, Tyrell, Amanda, Elena, and now, me. I used to think I had failed. That maybe I hadn't been bold enough, fast enough, ruthless enough. But hearing him, hearing the deliberate cruelty in his voice, I realized I had never stood a chance. My career hadn't slipped away. It had been destroyed on purpose. And suddenly, this wasn't about restoring my name. It wasn't even about justice for me. It was about making sure no one else walked into his office alone again. "I'm done waiting," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We take him down." Jonas nodded. "We go wide?" "No," I said. "We go public." The campaign was ready. The documents, the emails, the audio, the timelines, the testimonies. All we needed now was the right time. And David? He had no idea that the final meeting he would ever control was already over. It went live at 9:03 a.m. Jonas had sent me the embargoed link an hour before, but I hadn't opened it. Not because I was afraid of what it said, but because I already knew every word by heart. I'd helped write it. The headline was simple, surgical. Inside the Empire of Silence, How David Cartwright Built His Career by Erasing Others. By Jonas Rell Vertical Bar, The Intersect. The article was long, investigative, sourced, devastating. It opened with the Severintech deal, laid out in a precise chronological breakdown of stolen credit and falsified authorship. My name was there, clearly linked to every draft, every key contribution. Then came the pattern: Anna Martins, Tyrell James, Amanda, others, some named, some anonymous, all connected. Then the audio. Jonas embedded a transcript, but also included a soundbite. The moment David said, "Women like Milana need to be taught a lesson." It hit like a bullet. Within 30 minutes, #Cartwright cover-up was trending. Investors began issuing vague statements of concern. By noon, 2 of our firm's largest backers had quietly removed DSV from their portfolios. A third, an international tech fund, issued a formal press release. "We do not condone leadership structures built on suppression, theft, and retaliation." But the real detonator came just after lunch. The SEC released a statement confirming it had launched a preliminary investigation into multiple allegations of ethical misconduct, fraud in reporting, and possible IP misrepresentation linked to David Cartwright's leadership practices. They didn't use the word criminal, not yet. But the scent of blood was in the water. I was in Jonas's apartment, watching it unfold live. Phones buzzing, screens updating by the second. Amanda and Samir sat across from me, stunned silent as the empire David had built began to visibly collapse. Then came the press conference. Elena. She stood at a podium outside a modest community center, not in a suit or expensive dress, but a plain navy blouse and jeans. Her voice was calm, but powerful. "I stayed silent for years," she said, "because I believed no one would listen, because I was told by my husband that no one would care, that people like him get away with anything, that people like me should stay quiet." She paused. Cameras flashed. Her hands didn't tremble. But people cared, and more importantly, they believed, not just me, but all the women and men he trampled to climb a ladder he didn't even build himself. She looked directly into the camera. "I have evidence, emails, voice recordings, financial statements, proof that David Cartwright used his position not only to abuse his staff, but to isolate and harm his family. The same manipulation he brought home, he practiced at work." Jonas's phone buzzed. He looked down. "Investor Group just pulled the plug," he said. "They froze DSV's executive accounts. Cartwright's locked out." I closed my eyes. In just over 5 hours, everything he had built was turning to ash. And I wasn't cheering. I wasn't gloating. I was breathing. Finally. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. Loud and undeniable. David Cartwright's voice had once dominated rooms. Now it was playing on every news outlet in the country. And this time, he couldn't edit the ending. The office was quiet. Too quiet. It was just after 6 p.m., late enough that most of the staff had cleared out, but not so late that the lights had gone to sleep. I sat in David's leather chair, legs crossed, spine straight, like I belonged there. Because, in a way, I did. The documents were spread in neat piles across his desk. Every lie, every theft, every threat. The door creaked open. David Cartwright walked in, jacket slung over one shoulder, phone in hand, mid-sentence. He froze when he saw me. "Milana," he said slowly, like he was trying to place me in a memory that had grown inconvenient. "What are you— You might want to sit," I said calmly. He didn't. Instead, he looked around as if expecting security to sweep in and escort me out. "No one's coming," I added, my tone even. "Not for me." He stepped forward, false confidence in every movement. "If this is about the article—" "It's not just an article," I said, and slid a folder across the desk. "It's a statement. This—" I pointed to the file— "is evidence. Financial manipulation, project misattribution, unauthorized IP transfers." His face twitched. I pulled another document. "Our complaint number 14C9, uninvestigated retaliation claim. Amanda. You remember her, don't you? And this one?" I tapped the final folder. "Is a sworn affidavit. Domestic abuse. Elena submitted it this morning, along with time-stamped recordings and medical records." For a moment, he said nothing. Then his eyes narrowed. "You think this scares me?" "No," I said. "I think it exposes you." He leaned forward, a glint of the old menace flashing across his face. "You don't know the kind of enemies I've made, the kind of power I still hold." I stood. Finally, slowly, let him see it, my strength no longer buried beneath compliance or fear. "You called my work pathetic," I said softly, but firmly. "But my work stands on its own. It always has. It got results, it built trust, and it outlasted every wall you tried to build around it." I leaned in, meeting his gaze. "What about yours, David? Strip away the lies, the threats, the stolen credit. What's left of your work?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came. A knock came at the door. It opened before he could answer. 2 board members entered, Margot and a man I didn't know. Suits on. Expressions grim. "David," Margot said coolly, "you're being placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. You'll receive no access to systems, and all further communications will go through counsel." He turned to her, eyes wide. "This is absurd. I built this firm." "No," Margot said, glancing at me. "People like her built it. You just signed your name on top." "And David," the other board member added, "your wife has filed for divorce. Her legal team will be in contact by morning. Also, there's an open SEC investigation. You'll be contacted soon." David stared at me, at the folders, at the ruins of the empire he thought would never crack. And for the first time, he looked small. I picked up my bag and turned to leave. No final insult. No gloating. Just a quiet truth left behind like a sealed verdict. I built something real. He built a mask, and masks always fall. In the weeks that followed, David Cartwright's name vanished from the firm's leadership page. The investigation expanded. More stories came out. More people stepped forward. His empire collapsed not with a bang, but with a quiet, complete unraveling. As for me, I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for recognition, for safety, for truth. I got all 3. I now lead my own team, a place where voices aren't erased, where work doesn't need to scream to be seen. Amanda joined me. So did Samir. We don't chase power. We build things that last. And when I speak now, I don't lower my voice. So here's what I'll leave you with. If someone calls your work pathetic, let it speak louder than their insult. If someone tries to silence you, don't shout. Record. And if someone like David stands in your way, remember, even the tallest walls crumble when you start digging at the foundation. And never forget, the work you build with integrity, it stands, even after they fall.